The summer of 2019 remains a vivid, unsettling memory. I was 21, spending the break at my parents' house, and on a pure impulse, I decided to go camping in the vast woods that formed their backyard. It wasn't a planned trip. I simply woke up one morning and decided to go. I'd done it countless times before, so it felt routine. After letting my parents know my general direction, I left at 4 p.m. with my packed bag to find a spot before dark. I walked for a solid hour, enjoying the familiar sounds and smells of the forest. These woods were deep and untamed, without any real trails, making the chance of meeting someone incredibly rare. I finally found a nice open clearing and got to work setting up my tent, clearing the ground and building a small, cozy campfire. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, I felt completely at peace. It was the perfect, solitary evening I had hoped for. That peace was shattered all too quickly. Just as the sun dipped below the treetops, casting long, distorted shadows, I heard it. A voice. It was a male voice, low and muttering, as if in conversation. The dense trees created a confusing echo, making it impossible to tell where it was coming from. The growing darkness and the maze of shadows made it even harder to see anything beyond my firelight. I stayed still, hoping it was just a passerby who would soon be on their way, but the voice didn't leave. It continued for a solid 4 or 5 minutes, not moving away but seeming to linger on the periphery of my clearing. This wasn't someone hiking through. It felt like someone staying put. Gathering my courage, I called out a hesitant, "Hello? Is someone out there?" The moment I spoke, the muttering stopped. The forest fell into an absolute heavy silence. The sudden quiet was more alarming than the voice had been. I called out again, my voice tighter with anxiety. Nothing. Only silence answered me. A deep sense of unease settled in my stomach. With only about 20 minutes of usable light left, I made a decision. I would not stay here. The clearing now felt like a trap. I quickly packed my tent and gear, stamped out my fire, and moved back into the trees, searching for a new place to camp. The fading light rushed me, and after 15 minutes of frantic searching, I had to settle for a less ideal spot, a simple patch of ground between some large trees. By the time I finished setting up for the second time, full darkness had enveloped the woods. Surprisingly, the deep darkness felt safer. The complete silence would now work to my advantage, acting as an early warning system against any approach. I built another small fire and tried to reclaim my night. I focused on making s'mores, losing myself in the simple, comforting ritual of roasting marshmallows. It was a familiar act that helped calm my nerves. I stayed by the fire for hours, eventually letting it die down to a soft glow as it got late. It was then that I heard it, a single, deliberate crunch of dry leaves from behind me and to my left. I froze instantly, all my senses on high alert. The sound did not repeat. After a tense moment, I called out a quiet, "Hello?" This time there was a response. A man stepped into the faint edge of the firelight, but not from where the sound had originated. He emerged from a different part of the tree line with an unsettling casualness. "Didn't mean to scare you," he said with a hollow smile. Before I could even process his arrival, he walked right up to my fire and sat down on a rock across from me, holding his hands out to warm them, as if he belonged there. My mind raced, trying to catch up. Can I help you? I think you're at the wrong campsite," I finally stammered. His reply was a flat, simple, "No." It was an answer that made no sense, and was deeply unnerving. He offered no explanation. A heavy, tense silence fell between us. In a desperate attempt to break it and maybe make sense of the situation, I asked the question that had been haunting me. "Do you happen to be the one I heard talking out in the trees around my other campsite earlier?" His reaction was subtle but chilling. He kept his eyes on the fire, but all expression drained from his face. His voice became a cold, dead monotone. Must have been someone else. In that moment, I knew with absolute certainty that I was in serious danger. His lie was palpable. Before I could form another thought, another sound broke the night. The distinct snap of a twig from the exact spot behind me where I'd heard the first footstep. My blood ran cold. He wasn't alone. I snapped my head back to look at the man by the fire. He was no longer looking at the flames. He was staring directly at me, and the look in his eyes is something I will never forget. It was utterly cold and predatory, devoid of any humanity. Pure adrenaline took over. I launched myself from my chair and sprinted blindly into the black woods. I heard a sharp, frustrated curse from the man, followed immediately by the sound of heavy footsteps giving chase. But the darkness that had frightened me now became my savior. I knew these woods from a childhood of exploration. I weaved through trees and over logs with a frantic, familiar energy until the footsteps behind me faded away. I didn't stop running until I burst out onto the road that led to my parents' house. I stumbled inside, breathless and pale, and managed to explain what happened. My parents immediately called 911. The next morning, I led a team of sheriff's deputies back to the campsite, but there was nothing to find. It was completely clean. My tent, the fire pit, every wrapper, everything was gone. It had been erased, as if I had never been there at all. This was perhaps the most terrifying part. It confirmed a sinister level of intention. They were methodical. While they might have just been thieves, their behavior, the stalking, the confrontation, the chase, suggested something far worse. The complete eradication of my presence hinted at a desire to leave no trace, a thought that haunts me to this day. I never again set foot in those woods. The familiar had become forever menacing, and the peaceful silence I once loved now echoes with the memory of a cold, dead voice and the predatory stare of a stranger. The memory of the previous summer's terror was a fresh scar. By the following year, a defiant need to reclaim my peace led me to book a stay in a decommissioned fire lookout tower. I specifically chose the most isolated one available, a 9-mile hike into raw wilderness. Its constant availability on the booking site should have been my first clue, but I saw it only as a promise of solitude. The single online photo was a grainy, decades-old black and white shot, revealing nothing but a vague shape on a distant peak. Built in the 1950s, I knew it would be old, but the state of its restoration was a mystery I was willing to solve. This blind adventure felt like the antidote I needed. I packed my trusted gear, the routine now tinged with a new layer of subconscious caution. The trailhead was quiet at 9 a.m., the air cool and smelling of pine. The path itself was barely a suggestion on the land, often disappearing under undergrowth or scree, leaving me to rely on faded markers. For the first few hours, the hike was a grueling, monotonous climb through a dense tunnel of trees, offering no views, only a sense of claustrophobic immersion. After 5 hours, the tree line finally broke, and there it was. In the distance, atop the bald crown of the mountain, stood the lookout. It was small and simple, not a tall, stilted tower, but a square cabin raised maybe 15 feet on a stone foundation. The final hour of ascent was steep and exposed, but the unfolding vista behind me was a powerful reward. Reaching the base, I was breathless. The panoramic view was staggering, a seemingly endless expanse of blue-hazed mountain ranges. The isolation was absolute, and for a glorious moment, it felt like peace. The lookout itself was weathered and worn, its silvered wood telling stories of decades of storms. Patchwork repairs, a new pane of glass, a fresh sheet of tin on the roof, highlighted its age rather than hid it. A wraparound staircase of 20 steps led to a deck that circled the structure. Inside was a single, empty room with windows on all 4 sides and dusty wooden floors. It was Spartan, but it felt solid and secure, a fortress in the sky. I spent the remaining daylight hours soaking in the profound silence, broken only by the wind and a distant hawk's cry. Exhausted from the hike, I unrolled my sleeping bag early, as the sun set in a spectacular display. By 8 p.m., I was lying in the dark, tired but still awake, listening to the old building creak. About 40 minutes later, I heard it, a scuff on the gravel below, then the unmistakable sound of footsteps on the wooden stairs. My heart hammered against my ribs. I scrambled from my bag, a dreadful déjà vu washing over me, and rushed to the door, a flimsy thing with no lock. A man came around the corner of the deck. He was in his late 40s with longish, unkempt blonde hair. He wore a faded flannel and jeans. The most chilling part was his lack of surprise. He saw me and grinned, as if he'd known I would be there. "Great place to stay a few nights, isn't it?" he said, his voice a casual drawl. He took a few steps closer. "Yeah, it is," I replied, my throat tight. "I booked it for the next 3 nights." I stated it firmly, a boundary. "Are you camping around here?" I asked, my mind screaming at the impossibility of his presence. "Actually," he said, the grin not fading, "I was hoping to be staying here tonight." A cold knot tightened in my stomach. "Sorry," I said, the word feeling useless. He shrugged, his eyes scanning behind me. "Well, it looks like you've got enough room in there. I mean, it's just you here, right?" The question was invasive, loaded. Every instinct told me to lie. "No," I said, the lie coming quickly. "A friend is just a few minutes out, so we can't let you stay." The grin vanished. His face went flat, his eyes holding an unsettling intensity. He stared in silence for a long moment, then simply nodded. "Right, okay." He turned and left. It was only then I saw it. He had no backpack, no gear of any kind, no water bottle, no jacket. The reality was unthinkable. Nobody hikes 9 miles of brutal terrain without supplies. The dread that had been building solidified into pure ice. I stayed up for an hour, staring into the blackness but heard nothing more. Exhaustion eventually pulled me into a fitful sleep. I woke with the sun, the brilliant light making the night before feel surreal. I made coffee, trying to shake the unease. It was only when I went downstairs that I saw it. Tackled to the bottom railing was a small, torn piece of paper. On it, in smudged pencil, was written, "Sorry." Next to it was a crudely drawn smiley face. The casual note was horrifying. Sorry. For what? It meant one thing. He had come back. In the middle of the night, while I slept vulnerable and alone, he had stood right here. He knew I had lied. He knew I was alone. A violent shudder racked me. The morning's beauty now felt like a thin veneer over something menacing. I crumpled the note. Needing to prove he was gone, I went for a walk, scanning the tree line and slopes for any sign of him. I found nothing. No footprint, no camp, no wrapper. The absence of evidence was more frightening than its presence. I returned to the lookout, my peace shattered. The day passed in a nervous haze. I jumped at every sound. That night I stayed up late, determined to be vigilant. A battery-powered lantern cast a small pool of light in the vast darkness. I didn't start getting ready for bed until nearly 1 a.m. I grabbed the lantern and headed down to the tree line to relieve myself. As I reached the edge, I saw it, a flicker of movement at the very edge of the light, a dark shape shifting behind a tree. "Hello?" I called out, my voice thin. "Someone there?" The silence that followed was a listening silence. I didn't wait. I turned and ran back to the stairs, taking them 2 at a time. Back inside, the lookout felt like a glass cage. The windows everywhere made me a lit exhibit. The unlocked door was a joke. I was trapped. Terror took hold. I decided to pack. If I had to run, I would be ready. The process was frantic. I'd stuff an item into my pack, then rush to the window to stare into the void, then pack another item. Finally, my bag was by the door. I took my post at the window, and there he was. A man stood at the very bottom of the stairs, motionless. He was just staring at the first step, as if in deep thought. I could only see parts of him through the railings, but I was sure. The height, the build, the hair. It was him. And again, no backpack. My blood turned to ice. Why was he back? Why was he just standing there? This was no coincidence. It was a display. He was letting me know he was there. He was waiting. I stood frozen, watching the statue-like figure for 2 full minutes. Then, he moved. He took 2 slow steps back, paused, then turned and walked away along the base of the tower. The direction he took was blocked from my view. He was gone, swallowed by the night. In that moment, all doubt vanished. This was stalking. My gut screamed a final clear message. If you stay, you will not leave. I didn't hesitate. I waited 5 agonizing minutes of silence. Then, I shouldered my pack, turned off the lantern, and crept down the stairs. The descent into that blackness, knowing he was out there, was terrifying. I held my open pocket knife in a white-knuckled grip, expecting a hand from the dark at any moment. I walked blind for 15 minutes before the trail became impossible. I turned on my lantern, praying the beam was too low to see from afar. The next 5 hours of hiking were a special kind of hell, a journey fueled by pure adrenaline and fear. Every sound was a threat. The sunrise felt like a pardon. I emerged from the forest exhausted and shaken to my core. The horror of those nights is hard to articulate. It was the violation of a sanctuary, the confirmation that malice could find you anywhere. The detail I can't escape is that I had told him I was staying for 3 nights. He had no reason to come back unless his intentions were fixed on me. He thought I'd be there for a 3rd night. I am certain with a conviction that chills my bones that had I not fled into that darkness, the story that began in the woods would have had a much more final ending. The dream was a solo 2-month journey from Montana to Alaska in my SUV, which I'd converted into a camping rig. My goal was to drive the legendary Alaska Highway, a road famous for its remote and rugged path through western Canada. I prepared meticulously for mechanical issues and the harsh environment, but one thing left me feeling vulnerable. I couldn't bring my firearm across the border. That familiar sense of security was gone. The first day went well. I drove for 8 hours, the initial stretch still somewhat populated, but I knew what lay ahead. Long, desolate sections where gas stations were 200 miles apart. Every stop would be critical. As the sun set, exhaustion took over. I pulled off onto a secluded Forest Service road, finding an empty wooded lot. It was too dark to see much. I put up my window shades, climbed into the back, and fell into a deep, uninterrupted sleep. I woke refreshed and stepped out into the crisp morning air to stretch my legs. I noticed a narrow trail and decided to explore. It led me to another campsite after just 5 minutes. But the moment I entered the clearing, a wave of unease hit me. The site was a wreck. A tarp was torn and snagged on a bush, a fire ring was scattered, and a single boot lay abandoned. It didn't look abandoned. It looked ransacked, as if someone had fled in a panic. My gut screamed danger. After only 30 seconds, I turned and hurried back to my car. My relief was short-lived. Parked right beside my SUV, so close our doors almost touched, was a black pickup truck with dark, tinted windows. It hadn't been there minutes before. No one was outside. I felt watched, exposed. The violated campsite and this sudden, silent arrival felt connected. I didn't hesitate. I got in my car and left immediately. I drove for 4 hours straight, my eyes constantly checking the mirror. I finally pulled into an old, isolated gas station with a single pump. I was alone, the mountains stretching in every direction. As my tank slowly filled, I saw a cloud of dust on the horizon. A vehicle was approaching. My stomach dropped as it got closer. It was the black truck. It pulled up to the other side of the pump. The logic was sound. Everyone needs gas here, but it felt wrong. Why visit that remote campsite only to leave right after me? My pump clicked off. I rushed, not waiting for a receipt, avoiding looking at the tinted windows, and sped away. I never saw the driver. The encounter left me unsettled, but the full tank was a comfort. I drove until sunset, determined to find a safer spot. I found a hidden turnoff nestled in thick brush. It showed no signs of recent use. It felt secure. I cooked dinner outside, but, heeding a persistent instinct, decided against setting up my tent. I retreated to my SUV as darkness fell. Feeling good about reaching Alaska the next day, I stayed up watching a movie on my phone. For hours, I felt calm. The isolation felt peaceful again. Then, around 11 p.m., I heard it. The sound was unmistakable. The crisp, rhythmic crunch of footsteps on dry leaves. It was a person right outside my car. I froze, lowering my phone. I slowly turned to look out the side window. A man's face was pressed against the glass, staring directly at me. I jolted backward, gasping. The face vanished. Pure adrenaline took over. I scrambled over the console into the driver's seat. Just as I landed, I saw a second man running toward my car. There was a deafening crash as he smashed my rear passenger window with a rock. Glass shards sprayed everywhere. My hands shook violently as I fumbled for the ignition. I could hear the first man at my driver's side door. In the mirror, I saw an arm reaching through the broken window, groping for the interior door handle. I found the ignition, turned the key, and slammed the gas pedal. The SUV lurched forward just as the back door swung open. I swerved onto the path. As my headlights swept the trees, they illuminated the black truck, hidden in the brush. They had followed me. They had been waiting. I drove a mile before pulling over, my whole body shaking. I got out, shoved the back door closed, and called 911 with my one bar of service. The dispatcher was hundreds of miles away. It was a lost cause. I had no plate number, no description beyond 2 men. They were gone, vanished into the endless wilderness. I drove through the night, too scared to stop. I crossed into Alaska at dawn, the cold wind blowing through the broken window. I got it repaired in the first town I found and continued my trip. I saw incredible things, but the experience cast a long shadow. The intentions of those men, attacking an occupied vehicle in the deepest dark, are a void I refuse to peer into. Some questions are better left unanswered, their darkness left behind on a remote trail, far in the rearview mirror.